Hi, everyone. I am Jim Spellos. Welcome to Cooking with Chef Carole. Wendy can't be here this week, so I'm filling in for her. And our monthly series comes back again, presented by Plant Powered Metro New York and co sponsored by the Marlene Myerson JCC in Manhattan. And we are so delighted to be partnering with them again. So, Plant Powered Metro New York empowers people to achieve better health and overcome chronic disease through a whole food, plant based approach to nutrition. We offer evidence based education, resources, and a grassroots network of support to create community and inspire change. Together as leaders, organizers, and educators, we raise awareness about the dramatic health benefits of whole food plant based nutrition, empower individuals to make their own lifestyle adjustments, and lead projects that spark changes in food policy, practice, and food. So, a couple of general announcements. Congrats to our recent graduates of the New York Health and Hospitals Jumpstart program. And welcome to the current participants in the public Jumpstart, including those watching the replay today. So, it's so great to have you join us. And it is November. Dark leafy greens, Swiss chard, kale, oh, yum, yum, collard. All the hardy autumn and winter vegetables are definitely abundant at the farmers markets now, along with still apples, squashes, and all sorts of good stuff. So, as usual, we encourage you, buy organic, or even better yet, regeneratively grown vegetables, as the quality of the soil makes a difference to your health and helps in regulating climate change. And also, don't forget to participate in your local CSA, that's Community Supported Agriculture. As always, let us know where you are in the chat. Ask questions there. Carole always allows time during the take and at the end to get as many questions answered as possible. And as always, like us, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, however you're watching, please just press that button. It does help. November is a really, really important time for Plant Powered Metro New York. And before we get to Chef Carole, I want to make sure that you know that we have our Plantathon 23 coming up. Mark your calendars. It's an incredible lineup of 10 events from the 13th to the 28th of November. There'll be 2 events in person and 8 in our virtual showcase featuring several of the plant-based movement's powerhouse educators and presenters. Topics such as diabetes, which will be our first online one with Robbie Barbaro of Mastering Diabetes, as well as so many other people that are going to be teaching. We have a Rising Young Chefs and Taco Night, presentations for the Spanish-speaking community. We have Heart to Healthy Heart with Dr. Joel Furman. Chef AJ will be with us. And another favorite of ours, Dr. Ron Weiss of Ethos, will be also here. And it'll all culminate with Chuck Carroll from Exam Room Live in a live event in New York City discussing food addiction and how to overcome it. And as always, the purpose of the Plantathon, and this is our 3rd year, is to celebrate the plant-based health movement while we raise funds for our mission. And these funds, especially this time of the year, allow us to plan our programs, often free to the public, like the whole Plantathon is for our next year's events. So we do hope you'll join us, give generously. And if you're not on our mailing list, sign up on the homepage and we'll get some links out there so you can click right there and you'll see the details of the events. So with all that said, I just love to be able to say hi to my friend Carole and say, Carole, cauliflower for Thanksgiving? That sounds awesome.
You know, most of our demo today is about leafy greens, as you mentioned, right? But
Yep.
I'm very excited because I've been waiting 1 year to show everyone this cauliflower that I discovered myself last Thanksgiving on the T. Colin Campbell website. They had a whole thing about Thanksgiving, and I love this cauliflower so much that I had to show it to you. So it's not quite a leafy green, but it's a good vegetable. And I'm going to get it in the oven and we're going to marinate it. And it is going to be served as a whole cauliflower like this. And ultimately, you would cut it as steaks. So it's really a centerpiece, much like replacing what would be a turkey on the table. You could have several cauliflowers. I like serving it over rice, and sometimes I put spinach on the plate and rice, or today I'd like to put beet greens if we have time for all the presentation. But let's get it in the oven, and because it does take 45 minutes to cook. So the first thing I've done, oh, and I want to tell you other things that we're making. We're making a very hearty soup. It's cold and it's time for soup. And what I love about this soup is it's really, I don't want to say it's a kitchen sink soup. It's a soup that is really basic, but it includes everything that we all eat. And what is that? It includes beans and grains and vegetables and leafy greens. 4 things, simple, simple soup. You can make lots of substitutions in the soup. So we'll make soup next. And then I have a little surprise. As you know, I'm a baker, and I found a recipe that has spinach inside muffins, and I have been making them over and over again since finding this recipe. It was actually given to me saying, my friend said, try this one out. And I did, and I love it so much. And it's perfect to get your greens in. And for people that have difficulty getting their greens in, I'm a bean person. And so sometimes I have to remind my own self, how many greens am I eating? Am I getting enough? So it's good to be able to sneak them into a smoothie or sneak them into a muffin. So there are ways of sneaking things in, but it's also very good to have them just on your plate. So let's get started with this recipe. It's super simple and easy, and we're going to make it all in the food processor. We're basically making a marinade for this cauliflower. So what I did was I took off this stem. It still has the core in it. I took off all the big leaves, and then what we need to do, the very first thing, is to take a knife and just like stab it everywhere. We're basically putting in slits so that the marinade sinks in into the cauliflower, okay? Now, one thing, I've probably made this recipe at least twice a month since last November. And 2 things I want to tell you. One is I've never tried it where you just make the florets and you take it apart so that it's not a big centerpiece, and you just toss it with the marinade and you do florets. So that's one idea that I just want to put out there to you, that you can do florets and then toss it and then put it in the oven. And that could be very delicious. But our purpose here is having a centerpiece and making steaks, and we'll slice it up as a Thanksgiving entree. The other thing I want to tell you is I made the recipe last November, and I never kind of looked at it again, to tell you the truth. And what I realized when I was typing it up for everyone is that it says at the very end, one of the last steps, it says, remove from the oven and sprinkle with some tamari, put a pinch of black pepper and sesame seeds and green onions. Well, I do all the decorating because the decorating is so delicious, the green onions and the sesame seeds and the black pepper. But somehow I've always been putting the tamari in the marinade, not sprinkling it on afterwards. So excuse my out of order way of doing things, but I'm going to continue the way that I've always done it. So let's just start putting the things into the food processor, which is just right here to the side. You can't see it, but it's just this bowl like this. And I like using the food processor like this. This one is a Cuisinart. You could use a Nutribullet, whatever you want to blend. And the very first ingredients are 2 teaspoons of grated ginger. So I grated the ginger very fine, and this is the ginger, the fresh ginger, right? And you want to take off that skin. Sometimes I don't actually, but you would just peel it. You can use a peeler, a vegetable peeler. I find that it's always easiest to just take a spoon and just peel I'm covering up my cutting board here, but just to peel it by taking the spoon and peeling it, and it literally comes off super, super easy. But sometimes I'm super lazy and I don't even do that step. So that is your ginger. Okay, then our next thing is going to be 1 tablespoon of tahini. And tahini is made from sesame seeds, and it's just pureed. And it's a good staple to have in your refrigerator or pantry. I don't even put mine in the refrigerator. People always ask, do you have to keep it in the fridge? And I don't. But I also know that I go through it quickly. And then we need 1 tablespoon of miso. Now, I mentioned in the recipe that my favorite brand, I love this South River miso, but you could use any kind of miso that you want. This particular one is a chickpea, and we want to have 1 tablespoon. So I'm just gonna get that out and put that in there very simply. And then the recipe calls for, we need a sweetener because it's going to be a little bit spicy and a little bit sweet, okay? And it says that we need to have 3 dried prunes or dates pitted. So if you were not using 3 dried prunes, you would use 3 medjool dates or 3 dates. I have a nice date here. I don't like so much sweetness, so I have cut the recipe back for myself, and I only use 1 date opposed to 3. You'll figure it out. At the very first time I made it, I followed it exact, and I used 3 dates, but it was just too sweet for me. So I've taken it back to 1. So that's something to note. Then we need a 1/2 teaspoon of turmeric, and turmeric is a very bright yellow. You can see the spice, another essential ingredient that I have in the pantry. And then it says that we need 2 tablespoons of tamari, and this is what I was talking about. It says to sprinkle that on at the end. Well, I actually use it in the marinade. So you can follow me and do it differently than they intended, or you can do the sprinkling on the outside. It's up to you. Okay, so that's our tamari, and I'm using one that is a tamari that is gluten-free and also 28% less sodium. And if you can't use tamari, then go ahead and get the coconut aminos. That's a very good substitute. And then we need to have 3 tablespoons of broth. And let me just rinse this. I have 2 jars of broth here for our soup. So I'm just going to take, and there have been times when I've made this recipe that I have no broth around, and I just use water. So it's not a big deal, okay? If you use water, it's just fine. But it's good if you can use the broth because it's got more flavor, and you're always wanting to have flavor. So that is everything that's going in, and we're just going to blend that up. So it's going to be noisy for just 1 minute. And sometimes when I'm doing the ginger, today I grated it on a grater and I measured it, but sometimes when I'm super lazy, I just literally cut like 1 inch of ginger and I just chop it up and then I throw it in here and I let it chop up itself in the food processor. None of you would believe, but sometimes I'm a very lazy cook. Okay, so that's blended, and the key to getting this, and why I like using this particular machine, again, you can use a blender, you could use your Vitamix. I like this machine very much for this reason, is that you can actually put your head in it, see everything, see all the marinade, and you can easily scoop it out. It's not going to get stuck to anything. I'm a little crowded here. So it does tell you in the instructions that you can put the marinade on with your hands. And as much as I love doing things with my hands, I just like to pour it on, and you'll see that I kind of work it around. And you want it to cover every single spot, okay? You don't want any white showing, okay? And I didn't taste the marinade. I know it's fantastic. And again, you could try to do this with the florets. I think it would be delicious. Every time I make this, I think, oh, I'm just going to cut it up and make florets. But there's something about doing this on a weeknight when I'm home from work and it's super fast to just do this, pour it on. I don't have to toss anything, and I just get it into the oven, and then I forget about it for almost 45 minutes. The thing is, you do have to watch it a little bit because the oven is preheated at 425 degrees, and it can start to burn a little bit on the top and get brown. And I do want to encourage any of you, if you're making this for Thanksgiving, to make 2 or 3, honestly, because I have brought this to a potluck before, and everybody loves it, cuts into it, takes it, and then, I don't know, it seems to go very quickly. It disappears is what I'm telling you. So I just think it's good to make, I would probably make 2. 2 or 3, depending on, obviously, if it's a side dish, if it's your main entree. And basically, you're going to end up slicing it, okay? And you've seen I've carefully gotten everything out. I've given it a really fantastic coating. It looks like this. There is some, I have parchment paper on the thing, and it's covered all the way. Maybe there's some at the bottom, maybe that didn't get covered, but the stuff that is on the marinade, when it's on the parchment paper, you should see when I come out of the oven, I'm like practically licking my fingers over it because I love it so much. So this is all we're doing. This is going in the oven now, and it's supposed to cook for 45 minutes. Now, if you have a bigger cauliflower, maybe it needs to cook for 55 minutes. You're going to know that it's done when you put a fork or a knife in, and it slides through really easily, and you know your cauliflower is done. So let's get this in the oven right this minute. I have it preheated, and we're going to watch it.
Hey, Carole. Hey, Carole.
Yes.
Yeah, somebody asked that dressing looks so amazing. Can it be used with like broccoli florets or other vegetables?
Oh, I think it'd be beyond delicious on broccoli. I think it'd be really, really good. Honestly, we're speaking out leafy greens on bok choy. I think it would be delicious. And honestly, I think it's endless what it would be good on. And I love it so much on the cauliflower. And somebody definitely should try it with the florets. Just tossing, I would cut a, you don't even have to buy the whole cauliflower. You can buy the florets in the bag, right? And then just throw the florets in the bowl, put the marinade, toss, and then definitely put it on a sheet of parchment, and it will cook faster. It won't need the 45 minutes. It only needs 45 minutes because it's big and solid, and it needs to get warm, just as if you were cooking a turkey or something. You have to cook it all the way through, right? So that's why it takes the 45 minutes.
So for somebody who doesn't do soybeans, what can replace the miso?
I think you just don't use it, I don't, let me think about it harder.
Well, actually, somebody just said a chickpea miso exists and is good, so that might be a good alternative.
Honestly, that's what I use is a chickpea miso. And so that is what I use, chickpea miso, and I love this one so much.
There we go.
It is expensive. I have to tell you, miso's not a cheap item, but the fact is, if I spend $9 or $10, sometimes $12 on this jar, I'm just looking at the date. I've had this since February of this year because I date everything when I open it. Soybean, this is a miso is not going to spoil it's going to last for a long time in your refrigerator. And I still have quite a bit in here. So it's kind of like an investment. When I pull it off the shelf, I'm like, okay, I'm buying that once a year. And I only use a little bit. I like it a lot, miso, in soups and things because it gives it a little bit of a depth of flavor. Is there any other questions? Because I put that in the oven, and I just want to. We're done with that. It's over. We just have to decorate it when it comes out. And we're going to decorate it with scallions and black and beige sesame seeds. And like I said, if we have time, we'll serve it over rice and some beet greens, or you could serve it over spinach. You could make a beautiful platter full of kale, cooked kale. There's endless amounts of ways of presenting it. But let's move on to our soup. If
you bet.
Jim, you say there are no more questions.
Correct. Go for it.
Okay. So this soup, I made this soup just a week ago, literally. Why did I make this soup? One, because I have an abundant amount of kale, literally an abundant amount of kale coming from my yard. And we've already had our first freeze, and I've been kind of letting the kale still grow, even though the freeze has happened. I'm gonna put a lot of the kale away in the freezer, but I just wanted like a comfort soup about a week ago, and I thought, you know what? This is such a straightforward soup that you can interchange things. It's basically a vegetable soup with beans and quinoa and greens. And you can substitute the beans that you use. I recommend, the first time I made it with just white beans, meaning cannelli beans or great northern beans. You could make it with navy beans. But all the beans that you use, you want to either buy in a can and drain them and rinse them. Make sure you buy the no salt beans, or do what I do, which is I really encourage you to cook your own beans, because you'll have so much more satisfaction out of it. And today I changed it up a little bit because I just finished the soup a week and a half ago. Well, just literally the other day I finished it, and I had a whole pot to myself, and now I'm gonna have another whole pot. I said, you know what? I'm gonna substitute it and make chickpeas, because that will make it feel a little bit different for me. Okay, but it's a basic soup, and we're starting with what we call a mirepoix, and that is onions. And I'm just gonna get all this stuff closer so that you can see. I've chopped up one whole onion, and I've just small diced it. And underneath here is a bunch of garlic. I chopped up 4 garlic cloves, and then I chopped 2 stalks of celery, big stalks. You could put more celery if you want. And then I say to get 2 large carrots, to dice them, but today I actually decided not to dice them and to make little rings of them. Can you see the rings? And why did I do this? I have an entire bag that I've been trying to go through in my refrigerator of carrots that kind of had to come out of the ground and out of my yard, and they were only like 2 or 3 inches tall, and some of those were red, had red skin, which I left on, and some of them were just regular. And I'll just show you that some of those carrots I just keep on but they were literally like tiny, like maybe like almost like your thumb. That's what they look like. So today, instead of dicing tiny little carrots, it felt easier for me to make thin slice. So there's going to be a lot of circles in the soup with the chickpeas. That will make the soup all feel a little different to me than I made it originally. And then we're going to take quinoa. I measured out a half a cup. You want to be careful with your quinoa. Some of you might buy it in a package, and it might already say that it's pre-rinsed. So even when it says pre-rinsed, I still rinse it again. It does have a coating on it, which is kind of I want to describe it as a soapy taste. And a lot of people, when they tell me they don't like quinoa, it's because they haven't rinsed it. So while I'm thinking about it, and I don't want to forget, and I always rinse it no matter what. And this is a half a cup of a little sieve. It fits everything. Sometimes I don't even measure anything because I just know it fits a half a cup. And I'm just going to give it a good watering rinse. Jim, have people ever told you that they don't like quinoa?
You know, I've heard that from time to time. People have different approaches to different grains. The first time I ate quinoa, I got really sick because it was made poorly by somebody, and that
Oh.
made me hesitate for a while. But now, love it completely. Oh my
I
gosh.
love it, and I encourage all of you to try the different colors. This is the beige, simple, the regular quinoa, but there is red quinoa, there's black quinoa, and sometimes I know when I used to be in New York near Trader Joe's, there was tricolor that you could buy at the
Yep.
Trader Joe's,
Yep.
and that's really fun to have. And like rice, I try to make a big batch of it so that I have it. And I actually love quinoa in my oatmeal. And for those of you that don't like oatmeal maybe in the morning, you certainly have quinoa, and it doesn't take very long to cook. So this pan is already getting hot. I preheated it while we were talking. I can feel the heat by just putting my hand here. And we're going to water, or what you call water or broth. We're going to use broth because I made broth today. And we're going to get these onions and garlic in right away, okay? That is what we're going to do. Now, onions have their own natural sweetness. We've talked about this a lot. They have their own sugars that are delicious. Let me get a wooden spoon. And some of you might ask me about the broth. Today I had this pot, and as I was peeling the carrots or had ends of celery, I had this onion skin, and I also had some things in the freezer for stock because I'm all the time saving. I just put all those vegetables. I even have some tomato tops in here, and then I cover it with water, and I just bring it to a boil, and I let it cook for about an hour. And what does it yield? It yields it yields jars of stock and broth, and it's really great. And then what I do with these cooked vegetables is it goes right into the compost. So I feel like I've gotten every usage out of my vegetables, right? Things are expensive, but if you're like using it for your soup, and then you're using it for your broth, and then you're going to put it in the compost, you kind of feel like you're being responsible for all aspects of waste as well as eating well. So I'm going to put the broth back. I still have some in that pot. I made 2 big jars. So these onions, I haven't put any water in it whatsoever yet, and they're already starting to turn brown a little bit. Like I said, people can never believe that onions could become brown and caramelized, but they have natural sugar in them. So you could just literally cook over a high heat, and I can't tell you how good these onions smell. You see this is what they look like at the moment. They're already starting to brown. They're not sticking, but I'm going to put just a little bit of broth because that's how we water saute things. We water or broth saute. Broth just gives it a nicer flavor. Now, if I didn't have any broth, you could just use some water. If you're going to buy broth in a box, please look on the label and make sure that you're trying to get no sodium and you're trying to make no salt. And I don't have a brand to recommend. I know some people like Pacific as a brand, but every local neighborhood or local store has different brands. Just make sure what you're buying has no salt and no sodium and is made from all vegetables, right? So we have the garlic already cooking, and I just wanted to show you, I know that I talk endlessly about these, what I call the inner leaves of celery. I call this the sweet spot of celery. I love this part. You can use it as if you're using parsley. We'll chop it up in a minute. I'm going to get the celery cooking, and I'm going to get the carrots in here. Just getting everything here. This soup is going to take very little effort for us. It's just going to cook here right beside us, and it's going to, and let's cut these up. I left these just for, now you could use these as a garnish. It doesn't matter. It adds extra celery flavor, and I like it very much. I never throw the innards out. Like I said, I call it the sweet spot in the celery. It's so tender. This part is the most tender, most delicious. And you could put some in the soup and then save a little bit later for garnish. I have this empty ramekin here, so maybe we'll do that. We'll save some for garnish. But when you're making, salad, this is yummy part to put in. This part of the celery.
Hey, Carole.
Oh, and I have celery in the stock too. Jim, what did you say?
There's a question about the no sodium vegetable broth. Somebody's having a hard time finding it. Is it available online anywhere?
I'm the wrong person to. It's a good question, and I'm sure that person could write me, and I could look in my current store. It's a section of the store that I never look at. Because I've always, I learned to make my own broth from when I was a young person. And I can't think of a time that I've had to buy it in a box. But how about you? Do you use it?
We're making our own stock a good part of the time as well. There is I think it's Kitchen Basics, and I might be wrong on this, that has a no sodium vegetable stock that we've used in a pinch. Again, I'm going to double check that as well to see which ones.
I
But
mean, one time I bought the box stock because I was traveling and cooking or whatever, and I remember opening the box and it was so orange, and it felt like it was made out of all carrots and salt. Um, and I'm kind of always just a little bit turned off by the box kind, but there has to be one with at least
well,
low sodium.
we
Um,
got a comment from one of our viewers saying that Bone Fire is a good one, no salt, no oil. So there's a good place to start.
and
So
what is the brand, Jim? I didn't hear.
Bone Fire.
Okay, I don't know that brand. I don't know that brand.
Anybody out there who knows, let us know. Put it in the chat so we can share
Well,
the
I'm
information.
sure there is, and I think it's just about where you're shopping and if that brand is available. But if that person, I would just Google no salt, no sodium, vegetable broth, and I think we'd find it. And that person's work, I'm happy to look it up myself. So right now we have just the carrots, the celery, and the onions cooking like that. And it looks delicious, and we're going to go ahead and add the other things to it. I'm kind of not even looking at the recipe because it's basically a vegetable soup. So we're going to get our quinoa, our rinsed quinoa. It's not cooked. It's going to cook in the broth. Okay, so that's that. And then I say that you need tomatoes. You need 2 cups of chopped tomatoes. I don't care how you get those tomatoes. You can get a can of whole tomatoes and squish them with your hand as they go in. You can get diced tomatoes if that's the kind of thing you like. I have had literally my entire dining room table for the last 2 weeks full of tomatoes. They had to come in from the garden. They were not ripe yet. They're almost all ripening, and I have been consistently roasting tomatoes in the oven. What does that mean? I literally cut up the tomatoes. I put them in a casserole pan or some kind of roasting pan, and I put them on 350 degrees, and I let them just cook. And this was full this morning, like full of cut tomatoes. I have yellow ones, cherry ones, raw. I have all these different kinds of tomatoes. And it cooks down to this. And some of these tomatoes I'm actually canning, but this is going to be we're looking for about 2 cups. Okay, and I'll measure it. Even if we have a little bit more, a little bit less, I'm using it because my goal is to use these tomatoes. And if for some reason you want the soup to be a little more tomatoey, you could add a tablespoon of, You could add a tablespoon of tomato paste.
Tomato
I don't
paste.
have that here on the recipe, but I'm just telling you if you wanted more tomato. So I'm just shy, maybe a tiny bit of 2 cups. And I certainly want to get all these juices out of here. And we need about 8 cups of broth. Each quart here is 4 cups. So what I'm doing here is this is my way of getting everything out of the pan. And I'm just going to put this in here like this and rinse this out. And this gets my pan pretty clean and gets all that tomato. And I'm moving everything around now because I really want to have, the quinoa. I don't want it all to clump up. Get this into the soup now. And we still need another whole thing of broth to go in there. And we need to have some kind of beans. And I say cook your own beans, or you buy 2 cans of no salt beans. And back to the person's question, no salt beans I know for sure are easy to find because I buy them all the time. And I buy them when they're on sale, sometimes, 79 cents sometimes. So I belong to a bean club from Rancho Gordo, so I try not so much to buy canned beans, but I like having them in an emergency when I want to just put them on soup, on salad during the week, or sometimes I actually just want to have some kind of snack, and make a quick cucumber and chickpea salad or something.
So
I'm
ranch.
just draining the chickpea water. This chickpea water is called aquafaba. It's the same kind of water that is in the can. We can whip this up later for a dessert at some point. I would use that if I didn't have any vegetable broth. I would absolutely use the bean. If you're cooking your own beans, that water is delicious. So I tend not to throw it out.
Your comment about joining a bean club, that sounds really interesting. I know I love Rancho Gordo as well. Yours is incredible what you've gotten from there, isn't it?
It's incredible, and it's sometimes overwhelming, I will admit, if you're a single person like me and not a family, because you get 6 bags of beans every 4 months. Well, no, every 3 months. So you have to really be diligent and be on top of it. Like, I just got a notice saying the order's coming. I have no idea what comes in the mail. They pick out the kind that they're going to give you. It's always a surprise. I've been a part of the club for many years now, so I have my favorites. I get very excited when certain ones show up, but I'm all the time cooking them. But you have to stay on top of that. Otherwise, before you know it, you look in your cabinet and you're like, wow, I have so many beans. I have to start eating more beans. So I'm going to get these, and there was a time, Jim, just so you know, that Rancho Gordo for many, many years was not accepting any more people in their club because they're a small business and they like to be high quality and don't like to overstretch their staff, and also their farmers, and they want to have total control over everything that is growing and how they're getting it to their customers. But about maybe 2 years ago, a year after the pandemic, after they went through a lot during the pandemic when everybody wanted beans, they did open it up, and they almost let like 10,000 people in. But it's sometimes a waiting list, and it's worth waiting for. So I'm putting in 3 cups of chickpeas. That's what I'm doing while I'm talking to you. Okay, now here's a teeny bit left. I almost want to just throw them in, but I love to snack on them, so I'm absolutely just going to save them. Now, this soup is, again, just like a vegetable soup. It has beans now in it. It has lots of tomatoes. We do need to get in at least half of this. I'm not going to put it all in. I'm going to see how things absorb. And we're going to let this cook right here. I forget to do this when I'm by myself because I'm never in a hurry by myself. But I want the soup to get done. So I'm putting a lid on it because that will help bring it to a boil, okay? And that's where we're at with the soup. Pretty straightforward. I have some beans, bean water, I have some broth left, and I also have a few chickpeas. And if we remember, we'll use this celery to decorate our soup. Now, I do want to just look at the cauliflower while we're having a moment break, just peek my head in it. And I'm sure that it's starting to get brown. I just know it is. See, it's starting to get brown. I just want to show everyone how it's starting to get brown. You can see that it's getting brown. Soon, I'll probably put a little tint of foil over it. Because I want it to have some brown spots, but I don't want it to get totally brown. So I just make a little tint of foil over the top, and we're good. That way it doesn't get totally brown, but we need to get the inside cooked. Any questions about our very basic soup?
No, the conversations about beans and that Rancho Gordo again does have a wait list now for their bean club.
I believe it. And Jim, my friend David, who you know, he waited at least 3 years. In fact, I used to share beans with him because he would just want the beans. And you can in New York I mean, I know all of you aren't in New York, but there are a few places in New York that sell them at their store. And you
Because
certainly can just go to their
yeah,
website and just pick whatever you want, and they'll
right.
send them to you. It's just to be in the club it's a club, and you have
Yeah.
to wait to get in it.
And actually downtown in New York, the Essex Street Market, there's a place that does sell the Rancho Gordo beans. We've seen them there. So it's worth it. And just any type of good beans are so much better than the canned beans, right? It's just
Is
fresh
so much
beans.
better, and they're fresh. They're I don't want to say they're fresh. They are
Right.
fresh, but they're dried, and they, what does it require? So many people write to me about this. I don't know how to cook beans, and I don't have a pressure cooker. Honestly, I talk about this all the time, and it literally, before I go to sleep, literally I shut the light off in the kitchen, making sure everything is like the kitchen is closed. And I say, do I need beans tomorrow? Do I need beans? And I literally just put them in a pot and I cover them with lots of water, and then they soak. And then if I'm home the next morning, I start cooking them right away. Today I just cooked those chickpeas the minute I woke up. They were cooking, and they cooked for an hour, a little over an hour, and they were done. Soaking them just speeds it up. Okay, and if for some reason you're afraid of beans because they give you gas, then start with the smaller beans. Lentil beans, navy beans are actually small. And the beans that are maybe the heartiest and the most delicious are the bigger beans, like the pinto beans and the kidney beans. But what's beautiful about Rancho Gordo is that they have the ones that are all these heirloom ones, and they arrive and they're so beautiful. They're speckled, they're purple and white, or they're just, and they're so special in their flavor, and it's just worth getting new beans just to change it up.
Agreed. So soup almost done. How long
Yeah,
does it cook?
no, well, the soup is cooking, and what we need to do, Jim, is we need to, obviously, the celery and the carrots are very small, and the carrots I sliced, and they're gonna all cook really fast. What here we're gonna wait for is we want to make sure that and I forgot to put the spices. Oh my goodness gracious, I talk so much, I forgot to put the spices. So let's talk about the spices, because I didn't look hard enough. I just was making the soup. And when I was tossing the garlic and the onions and the carrots and the celery, that's when I would put the spices, okay? And what are the spices? I thought that it would be nice to use Italian seasoning. And this Italian seasoning here, what does it have in it? I'll read it. It has oregano, marjoram, thyme, rosemary, basil, and sage. So we need a teaspoon and a half. I'm just going to roughly say that this is a teaspoon. And again, it would have gone in with the onions when we were sauteing, but it's never too late to add flavor and herbs. And we need a teaspoon and a half. The other thing that I suggest, I used to never have this in my cabinet. In fact, it's not even a regular spice jar for me. It's still in this jar that it came in. But I learned that it was really helpful to have sometimes these pre-made blends, because it just made things a little faster and easier. So honestly, it's probably my first jar of Italian seasonings. It's not something I always have. And if something called for Italian seasonings in a recipe, I would just go out and grab my basil and my thyme. And I used to grab and just make my own from all the individual things. But this is pretty convenient to have. And look, we only need this little bit of spice, 1 teaspoon and a half, to go into this soup. And I'm just going to get it all mixed in. It would have been great if it was sauteed with the onions, because it just kind of, all that aromatics makes it smell so good, but it's going to be just fine like that. The other thing that I suggest, and I don't know, something that I used to have all the time in my home. My husband loved this spice called herbes de Provence. And that's a wonderful spice that you could substitute instead of the Italian seasoning. And it has almost the same things as the Italian seasoning, but it often, what makes herbs de Provence special is it often will have lavender leaves, and it will have bay leaves in it. That's kind of the difference. It will still have the oregano. It will overlap with the things that are in your Italian seasoning, but having herbs de Provence is a really special spice, and that could be easily substituted here. And then the other thing, we're not using salt, right, as a way of bringing up the flavor. So you could use a little paprika, you could use a little bit of cayenne, and again, with the onions that I was sauteing, I would have normally sauteed some red pepper flakes. So I'm gonna put in about a half a teaspoon here. I don't really measure it because I kind of just know my own tastes, and I like things a little bit spicy, but not like it's going to be like spice like so hot. And that is everything that goes in the soup, and I'm gonna just give it a stir again. It is a really hearty vegetable soup. I'm just taking out, I have a skin of a tomato, and all of my tomatoes were fresh, and I didn't bother. Sometimes people boil a tomato in water and then they peel the skin off. When I stewed those tomatoes in the oven, I literally just cut them up. And so I do have a few skins in here, but that's okay. I don't mind. And if they curl up in the soup, I just take them out. So does anyone have any questions? I'm going to tent because I know we need to do this, and I keep mentioning that we need to tent it.
Carole,
that knife. But are there questions?
Yeah, dried spices, how long do they keep? At the peak of their, I won't call it freshness,
I want to tell you that honestly, if you're storing them correctly, and that means that you're not having them in the sun, you're not having your spices next to your stove. A lot of people like to put them over their stove for decoration. Look at all the spices I have. But you really want to keep them in a dark place. You want to keep them out of the heat. And I really want to tell you that they can last a number of years. I know that sounds crazy to think that your turmeric could last a number of years, but it really can if you're storing things correctly.
And somebody's curious about the soup, the greens going in at the very end?
Yes, we're going to put a lot of greens in, and maybe we should prep those greens, but I do want to tent because it's so much on my mind about tenting the cauliflower that I don't want to forget. So let me just get a plate out here, and I'm going to move this for 1 minute so you can see that I'm going to tent the cauliflower because it's not done, and it's going to be brown, and it's starting to, I love when it gets this color. Honestly, I love when it looks like that. Do you see how it has a black little blemish at the top? And I love it. It looks so delicious right this minute, but it's not done. So what we're going to do is we're just going to tent it, and I'm literally just going to put a piece of aluminum foil on top. I'm one of those crazy people that reuses their aluminum foil like 10 times. I rinse it all the time. I just cooked beets in this aluminum foil just this morning, and now it's tenting the cauliflower. It's just because the oven is on high. It's really 425 degrees. That's a very hot oven. So, any more questions? So the soup, you can have the white beans or the chickpeas. It doesn't matter. It's a very, it's a straightforward vegetable soup. It's just that it has quinoa inside, and it has all these yummy vegetables. Could you put cauliflower? Yes. Could you put little peas, frozen peas? Anything of your desire. This is a really basic soup, and it's just such a hearty soup that you want to have like nice crunchy bread with it, and it's just a meal in itself. And so much of what I eat, I want to have it simple and a meal in itself. And
Yeah, and it is soup season now, so as the weather gets cooler,
yeah,
we
and I
love.
just want to show you what this looks like. It's just really super, super like it's cooking away. We definitely need to keep it on the burner because we need that quinoa to cook. And then we are going to put the kale in, but I like putting any kind of greens in at the last moment. And I do that with stews too. It's just so they don't overcook. And then I'm going to show you this kale. I have some in a vase here. This is kind of how I bring it in from my house. And I put it in a vase and I keep it on the counter and it reminds me to eat the kale. And what you want to do is you want to strip it and I usually hold it upside down and then I pull, whoops, and then it flies out of my hand. But sometimes, so you don't want to eat the stem necessarily. You don't want that stem. And sometimes I have to take the rib off with a knife because can be tough there. And kale is something that when you're eating it in a salad, if this is your first time eating kale, you do have to massage it. Okay, it likes to be massaged with your hands. If you're eating it raw, you really need to massage it. Otherwise, it will taste kind of tough in your mouth. And by massaging it, it actually softens it up. But I have a gigantic bowl here of kale that I took off the stem earlier, and we're gonna almost want to get in. I'm just trying to make some room here for myself so that I can let me move over here. And what we want to do is we want to chop this kale. And you can buy kale in bags, I never do that, and when I have done the chopped kale in a bag, because it's just easier, it's already washed and stemmed, and then you don't have to do anything. Sometimes I just know they give you kind of funny little bits inside, like they leave the stem or whatever. It's so inexpensive to buy a big bunch of it and just know that you have it for your smoothies, for your salad. I love just cooking it. I often just cook it in the hot oven at 425 degrees. I'll put a whole bunch of kale on a piece of parchment paper and just roast it. But I'll squeeze like a lime or an orange over top of it because it took me a long time to learn how to love kale. In fact, for years, I didn't like kale, and I only relied on my source of greens was mostly spinach. And kale's a better vegetable for you and than the spinach. There's nothing wrong with spinach. You're going to see we're going to use it in a few minutes. But the kale is a much more heartier, stronger, better vegetable for you. And the way that I learned to eat it was by buying those packages of baby kale, because baby kale were these little delicate leaves that weren't all curly like this, and somehow eating baby kale was quite delicious. So if you know someone or you're someone yourself that's just not a fan of kale, then absolutely buy the baby kale. There's also other kinds. There's Italian kale, what is it, Jim? I can't remember. I've forgotten the name. It's the lasanito.
Lacinato or dinosaur kale.
Yes, and there's so many kinds of kale. But this is the kale that literally I grew so much in my yard this summer. And it's just been steadily feeding me all summer long. And so we need like about 4 cups. That's probably more than 4 cups. But again, I'm just going to put it because I just got done chopping it. We're just going to remove it for now. And the soup is cooking away. And we're going to move on to the next thing. I want to just make sure that nobody has any questions about any of the things so far.
There was a question coming back about tomatoes and somebody being confused about the different types. So which one should the person buy to roast and make her own sauce?
I have to tell you, I'm a little fussy on my tomatoes. I think diced canned tomatoes would be really good for this. But for some reason, I don't like diced tomatoes. I don't know why I don't like them. They're little squares and they float around, and there's something about them that bother me. But diced tomatoes would be perfect. The other thing is I like buying, when I buy the can, maybe I have a can and I'll show you. Let me just look to see. Yeah, I do. I love these tomatoes. I know you can find them at Whole Foods. It's 100% organic. It's bio nature, and they're product of Italy, and they're no salt added. And these are whole tomatoes in tomato sauce. So I would just open the can, and then when I am taking them out, I would almost just squeeze the whole tomatoes, break them up with my hand, and then you'll get basically the essential tomatoes that I took out of my oven. So I hope that answers the question. You don't want tomato sauce. You want some kind of texture, and you either want diced tomatoes or you smash up your whole tomatoes.
What about fresh? Any particular types that people should go for? Your cherry tomato good?
I had fresh tomatoes. It can be any kind of tomatoes. And I'm not kidding you. I took that casserole pan and I had cherry tomatoes this morning. I had yellow tomatoes. I had red tomatoes. And I just cut them up, rough chop. And I put a few pieces of garlic in there. And I just put it in the oven and I just let them cook. And the longer you leave them in the oven, the more delicious they are. Because essentially, you're roasting the tomatoes. You know, you could, Muir Glen makes fire roasted tomatoes. That would be delicious in this kind of soup. That extra flavor of fire roasted. That's kind of what I've done by roasting the tomatoes. And I didn't want to make it complicated for you. It's just that I don't need to open a can of tomatoes because I literally have a whole table full of tomatoes. And I've been trying to use them regularly.
Thanks so much,
I hope that
Carole.
answers the questions.
It does, and they are very appreciative of the answer. So what's next on the agenda?
Oh my God, it's going to be delicious. First of all, the soup is cooking away, and it looks like what winter should look like. Really, like you're going to have a hearty bowl of soup. Let me just move some of these things out of our way so we feel like we're just not so crowded. And I'm going to bring this in. And I'm just going to wipe up for 1 second.
Hey, Carole, one more quick
Yes.
question about temperature and how long do you roast the tomatoes when you're doing the roast?
So when I pile them high in the casserole pan, almost like when you're, I don't know, for me piling high is just filling it up to the top, right? And then sometimes I put a whole sprig of basil in. Sometimes I put some thyme or some basil, or sometimes I put spices. Sometimes I put red chili flakes. But you don't have to do any of that. You could just put them in the oven. And I put them at a slow oven, not a hot oven, not 425, but I put them in a slow oven like 325 or 350. And then honestly, the longer you cook them, the better. Just the longer. You want to cook them for at least an hour. Again, I go in the oven and I kind of turn them, and you'll see they're cooking down when they cook, and you'll see that they'll get a brown edge. I can show you that a little bit on this pan. They get a brown edge. They get a brown edge, and I'm constantly, because that's kind of the caramelization of the tomato, I'm constantly taking the tomato and scraping down the sides because I want that brownness on the edge of the pot to go into the flavor of the tomatoes. I hope that answers the question. I can't tell you, I have an entire gigantic container in my refrigerator of roasted tomatoes because I'm going to be putting them away in those quart jars for the winter because I have so many. And there's nothing like in the middle of this winter pulling out your own tomatoes. I've spoiled myself living here now. I never had that in New York. I would always buy the can. I still have some canned tomatoes just in case. But if I can rely on the garden and having the fresh tomatoes to make soups and stews and whatever else needs tomatoes, and that's what I'm doing. Okay?
So perfect.
So I know not everyone can have a garden. Some people have gardens in their, community gardens in the city for sure. And our colleague Enrica has a big garden in Queens. I know that. So it is possible. So the next thing that we're going to do, and I'm really going to, these are called blender muffins. And it's a recipe that was given to me. And my friend said, try this. And I said, okay, it looks pretty good. It has all the right things in it. And it's quite delicious. I have written it up a teeny bit different than the original recipe. And I'll tell you where I've made my changes, okay? This recipe is supposed to be made in a blender, the whole thing. Literally wrote the directions up just as they were, that you literally blend the flour and then you blend all the liquid in the greens in a blender, and you then add the baking soda and the baking powder at the very end. And basically you haven't dirtied anything but your blender, okay? But I actually kind of made it my own way because I make muffins all the time and I'd rather not have all the batter in a blender. So I just want to tell you that I'm making it in a bowl. But we do need to make some of it in a blender, but I really am also making it in the bowl. So it's up to you how you do it. I'm getting all the ingredients out, and we'll step through it one at a time. Okay, so the dry ingredients, that's what I put in the bowl first, because that's how I bake. That's normal. You make the wet ingredients, you make all the dry ingredients, you put those two things together and you gently mix, and then you actually put the muffin batter in the pans. So this time, now the original recipe called for a half a cup of white flour. I do have white flour in the house, but I only have it for backup things like gravy or something that I just want to be neutral. But I have tried this recipe now with whole wheat pastry flour. I've tried it with regular whole wheat flour. I've tried it with spelt flour. And right now I'm getting ready to use gluten-free flour. That is a gluten-free flour that I brought in a bulk form, and in my area it's called cup for cup. I know that Bob's Red Mill also makes something that's called cup for cup in their own package. So we're using gluten-free because I want to have this particular batch gluten-free. Okay, so I have the half a cup of flour in here. Again, any kind of flour that you want. And then we need another half a cup of ground oats. Okay, and that's going to be your other flour. So I measured a half a cup of oats and I put them in the blender and I made flour. Just ground it up so it was really powdery. And we've done that before. I just didn't do it in front of you. And if you're wondering, do I measure the oats and if you measure the oats while they're whole and then you grind it up, you're going to get the same amount of volume. So a half a cup of old-fashioned oats is going to give you a half a cup of flour, okay? So we've just put those two things in there. Then we're going to add our baking powder, baking soda, and cinnamon. That's our rising agents and our flavor. And I have this lovely little whisk that I'm just going to whisk all this around. These are our dry ingredients. Now, what we need to do is get our wet ingredients. And this is the fun part. So I'm going to get the blender. And you could do it in a NutriBullet. You could do it in any kind of blender that you want, but whatever you do, you want it to be totally smooth. So if you're doing it in a regular blender, you want it to be high, on this highest speed possible, because you don't want any leafy greens. You want it to all be blended, okay? So what am I going to start with? It says 1 medium banana. Now you want your banana to have as many spots on it as possible. You want a really, really ripe banana. This maybe is more of a larger size, but maybe it's a medium banana. It's definitely not small. Okay, and we want the banana. I just want to go through this, and then we want spinach. Now the original recipe calls for spinach. I have to tell you that when I made this recipe the first time, I had the box of mixed greens. It had kale, it had chard, and it had spinach. It was one of those pre-mixed boxes of lettuce. And I use that instead of the spinach alone, and you can use chard if you want. Any kind of leafy green is going to work in here. Just know that if you're using the chard or you're using kale, anything, spinach is kind of a neutral kind of taste, and if you're using a heartier green, your muffin is not going to be as bright green, and also because I'm using a darker flour, usually I use a spelt or whole wheat, it made the muffin a darker color. So when you start to change out flours and things and change out the kind of greens, you're just going to get a darker muffin opposed to a bright green muffin. But no matter what, you have all the vitamins and nutrients, and it's all good. We need 1 teaspoon of vanilla, and that's going to go in here. And then we need 2 other things. Well, we need 3 other things. We need a half a cup of milk. This is soy milk here. You could use almond milk, oat milk. It won't matter. I already measured it out. It's a half a cup. And then we need to get our applesauce. The applesauce acts as 2 things. It acts as a sweetener, and it also acts as like a butter or an oil. So the applesauce has 2 different kind of properties, and it's very good. I buy these little cups because I do a lot of baking, and I like that I don't have to have a jar of applesauce in the refrigerator that might spoil. So we need a 1/4 cup, I think, of applesauce. Yep, a 1/4 cup. So I'm just going to get a spoon out, and we are going to get the 1/4 cup, just measure it off in here. These little cups are almost a half a cup. So you're going to have leftover, and I just either save it for a smoothie the next day, or it's so little bit left over that it's just eat it as a snack. But again, I buy those little teeny cups because it's just quicker, and it's, like I said, it's almost a half a cup. And then we need a 1/4 cup of peanut butter. And this peanut butter, I urge you to try to buy peanut butter that is just peanuts. Literally, when I read the ingredients, it says organic peanuts. It doesn't say sugar. It doesn't say salt. It doesn't say added palm oil. It's not a spread. It's literally just peanuts. Now, if you can buy the fresh peanut butter that you grind, that's also perfect. This peanut butter here is a little bit runny compared to the natural peanut butter when you buy it and you grind it yourself in the store. But that's going to be a 1/4 cup of peanut butter, and that acts as our fat. Okay, that is our fat. And if someone says, I don't like peanut butter or I'm allergic, maybe you can have almond butter. I'm not sure, but any kind of, I bet tahini would work as well, honestly. And the soup is boiling so much, I need to stir it. I'm going to lower it. It's really weird because when you're cooking soup, normally you're not standing on top of it. It's just cooking on its own by the stove and you walk away. But when I'm cooking here with you during the class and I'm making soup and it's boiling away, it kind of just feels like it's on me somehow. Okay, so we've got that, and and then we need 1 tablespoon, somewhere I have it, of flaxseed. This is a brown flaxseed. I usually have golden, but someone gave me a bunch of flaxseed, so I have a big bag of brown. So 1 tablespoon is going in there. And I just want to double check that I added everything. Oh, we didn't add our sweetener. So the recipe called for a 1/4 cup of maple syrup, which I followed when I first made it, and it was way too sweet for me. So I cut it back in the recipe to 2 tablespoons. And when I ate it this morning, the muffin, I thought, you know, it could almost use 1 tablespoon. So I really encourage you to do, I'm going to use 1 tablespoon and just a little teeny bit, because I don't think it needs so much sweetener, because depending on how ripe your banana is, you've got your applesauce in there, you've already got sweetener in there, right? So you can control that. The other thing you could use is, I suggest 1 or 2 whole dates, and then just make sure you take the pit out. Okay, so we're gonna take this over to the blender, and I'm just gonna mix it up really quickly here. And we're almost done. So that's really blended, super smooth. I'll show it to you so you see. I'm gonna get the good spatula that goes with that I have for the Vitamix, because it's but look, it's super smooth. You see? Super, super smooth. And we're gonna pour it in. Again, I left the recipe written as I found it, in the sense of you can make it all in the blender, and you don't have to dirty a bowl. But I know how things off. I didn't want to dig out the batter. I love my Vitamix very, very much. But remember how I showed you with the food processor, how you can look inside and you can take the blade out, and I like that. See, there's still a little bit in there, and no matter how hard I work at cleaning that, there's always going to be some left. I do as good of a job as I possibly can, and then I leave it, and that's just the way that's going to be. And then we're just going to mix this and fold the flour in. It's okay to have a few little bumps, but you want to not over mix it, okay? It's like making a banana bread, a zucchini bread. Muffins are meant to not be over mixed, and you literally just want to put the wet ingredients with the dry ingredients, right? And that's it. Now we're going to quickly talk about the pans and what to do and how to get the pans in there. We have our what do you call it? Our cauliflower in there. It's probably almost done. I'm certain that it's almost done. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to lower the oven, because I want to make these muffins right away. I'm just going to put the oven at 350. It's no longer going to be at a hot temperature. I'm just going to leave the cauliflower in there for another very few more minutes. And what we're going to do is get this soup, before we put the batter in, we're going to add the greens. And the soup looks delicious. We're just going to put all these greens in. And this, my favorite part, is having them on the top like that. I love that's my favorite thing, is just looking at how many I'm putting in. And then, of course, you're going to cook down. And sometimes I add more. Like if I feel like I haven't put enough in, I add more afterwards. It's really okay. Getting the spoon. And we have to mix this. And remember, I didn't put all the broth in because I said, let's just see how it cooks up. And I think we do need the extra broth now, because the quinoa has puffed up and there's not a lot of liquid here. And I want the soup to be soupy. And I'm just going to pour in all of that. But I also don't want it to be, I want it to be perfect. So it's up to you how much more broth you have in it. We're gonna put the lid on this. We'll serve this in just a few seconds. We'll give it a little bit of a taste right now while we're thinking about it, because maybe it needs something. I didn't put any black pepper. I don't think it needs black pepper. And we'll see how flavorful it is. I'm just taking the broth. It's very hot. It's so fresh, and it's so fresh. It's because I've used the tomatoes are. If you're buying tomatoes out of a can, just make sure you buy really good ones, the ones that you know are good flavor and good taste. We'll serve this up, but I just want to remove this for 1 second, and I'll show you how beautiful the soup is. It's just like what you want to serve. Like, I don't know. Look how beautiful. Can you see that, Jim? And everyone, it's so.
It is gorgeous, Chef.
It's just really like, it's so appetizing because I can't wait to get to those carrots, and I see the floating chickpeas, and it just like looks. It just all looks so good. And remember, we're gonna eventually, before we serve it, we're gonna put some cilantro just floating in there. But we'll serve it up in a few minutes. Let's just get this. I have a lot of things here. This lid gets very hot. It's a cast iron pan, and it gets very hot. Lots of people do write to me asking me about my soup pan, and I tell them that it's a Le Creuset. It's a 4.5 quart soup pot. It means a Dutch oven is kind of rectangular. This has a curve at the bottom. It's literally meant for soup. And it is something I've had for probably at least 25 years, maybe longer. So one time in my life it was an investment, but it's lasted forever. If you can't afford a Le Creuset, then I say get a Lodge. They're under $100. They are heavy, but they're cast iron. So I'm just showing you a wide range of muffin pans. This is the silicone pan that I almost use for everything all the time. It allows me not to grease anything, and you just use the scoop and put things in, and it's the pan I use the most. But in this particular recipe, she suggested that you could just use paper, and that it wasn't going to stick, that you didn't have to spray it with any kind of oil, you didn't have to grease the pan. So I actually tried that, and it actually works. So I want to show you. So what I do is I make a few big ones. I like making a few big ones, and then I make a few little ones because I like just the variety. Okay. And when I use the, I get a scooper, and I don't have a big scooper at home here, but I have this, and probably I just want to make sure everything is mixed up. I just saw a little bit of flour. Okay, and this is going to be, I'm going to put about a scoop in a little bit. You don't want to fill it up to the top. I'd say you want it to be about 3/4 full. Okay, so you're just going to scoop this. Whoops, and you're going to keep it inside the pan. And then you're going to cook these at 350 degrees. And I'm not kidding you, this batter is so delicious that when I first made it and I tasted the raw batter, I was just like, this is a winner of a muffin, because the batter is so delicious that I know that this muffin, once cooked, is going to be delicious.
Hey, Chef, while you're wrapping this up, how long do they keep, somebody asked, and how do you store them? Freeze?
Well, first of all, I store them in an airtight container, and for a couple days, I'd say 2 days after baking them, they can sit on the counter. If you're trying to keep them for a period of time, then I would definitely put them in the refrigerator, because there are no preservatives and they will start to get moldy. I mean, that's just what happens with a lot of vegan desserts that are made from, natural foods. They just start to, what do you call it? They can get moldy really fast and easily. Now, in these empty cups, I'm just going to put a little teeny bit of water. That helps the pan from not drying out. It helps put a little moisture in these empty cups. And this ultimately goes in the oven. I'm going to put it in the oven even though our cauliflower is there. I'm just going to put these in the oven right this very minute. Now, there are other cups that I decided I was going to try out. These are tiny little individual, silicone. It means that you have to wash each one of them, but they cleaned up pretty fast from my little metal pan. You can also use the little paper cups. And I like bite-sized muffins. For some reason, I like just having a few small bites and then I'm done. That's just kind of how I am. I like to, and so these we're going to fill very carefully because they're little, right? And they'll cook in half the time. The bigger muffins take, it depends on your altitude. Like where I live now, I live in high altitude. So I have to always kind of watch my baked goods because I live in the mountains and things cook a little differently at 7,000 feet. But these are going to take probably 10 minutes at the most, these little teeny bite-sized ones. And I don't know, this is a good time now for any questions while I'm just scooping. And then we're going to present everything. We're going to bring everything out. We don't have enough time, Jim, today for me to make a beautiful platter of the cauliflower, but I just want to reiterate that it would be beautiful to put on a bed of rice, maybe at Thanksgiving. You make a mixture of wild rice and white rice, and then you make a bed of greens, and then you could, and I was going to cook these beet greens that we have here. That's what I was going to serve it under, and probably when I eat it myself, I'm probably going to cook those beet greens, and that will be a meal in itself, just the cauliflower, the beet greens, and then a little bit of, rice to go with it.
So a quick question, is it okay to use only oat flour in this recipe?
I think you know what? I have tried everything. I have literally tried everything. I've tried whole wheat flour, pastry flour, spelt flour, white flour. Now we're making gluten-free ones. I think you just try to use the oats, and I think you'll be fine. I think it will be just fine. And if you're, some people that are gluten-free can actually buy gluten-free oats. So that's a choice too. I'm gonna take this soup off the burner. It's really, really hot. And we're going to start plating things. I'm gonna bring everything out and plate things. Get these little muffins in the oven. And I have muffins that are already cooked and done. We'll show you those. But Jim, do you want to, one, make sure there are no questions. Two, I want to wrap it up, and I just thought you could make all your announcements and then come back to me for the final presentation.
That will be perfect. Let me start doing that right now. We'll get right back to Carole.
Are there any other questions? No questions.
No other questions right now, no, but there might be some coming in, so we'll check those out.
Okay, and I'm going to put these just in the oven while I'm taking the cauliflower out.
Fantastic. And again, as we said early on, November is a really important time for Plant Powered Metro New York. Planathon 23 is almost here, starting on the 13th of November. The first virtual event, Robbie Barbaro of Mastering Diabetes on the 14th. We have 2 events in person, 8 in the virtual showcase, and there's some amazing presenters. Dr. Joel Furman will be with us, Dr. Ron Weiss. We have rising young chefs from our community. Please understand that the purpose of the Planathon is to celebrate the movement that we all are in while we raise the essential funds for our mission. And they do help us plan our programs for next year. So we hope you'll join us and give generously. If you're not on our mailing list, sign up on the homepage of the website. We'll get the link to it below, and you'll find the details of the events. And of all the events that we have, just join us for the events in the area. It is amazing what's out there, and we really want to see you and enjoy being with you. So next Cooking with Chef Carole is Sunday, the 3rd of December, post Thanksgiving. Maybe it'll be a Hanukkah Christmas holiday conversation. As always, you can follow us on Plant Powered Metro New York. You can access the great Plantathon schedule that we have lined up on the site that is here right now. And as always, if you want to follow Chef Carole, you can do so on our website, theveggievangard.com, or on Instagram at theveggievangard. And with that said, I see Carole getting stuff up to the front, so let's see what we can do here and get you on there. How's it looking, Carole? You almost done with
It's
everything?
looking so good that I have to garnish it. You cannot let me rush off without garnishing everything, but I just want to get the soup. Oh my gosh, the soup looks so good. I just finished this soup. I'm not kidding you. Like a few days ago, I was even eating it for a while for breakfast. I'm not kidding you. I was eating it at breakfast time because I just thought I'm never going to get rid of this soup. And now I have another big pot of the same soup. But I'm actually very excited about it because the chickpeas are in there and it looks so good. You see, it looks so good. Now we're going to garnish things. I'm going to put a little bit of the cilantro top, the little leaves inside this soup here. And that's going to make that soup look delicious. And you could serve it with some kind of crusty bread. And then we must not forget to finish. The finishing of the cauliflower is really, really important. And I just have to find what I did with the one. Can't make things disappear. Things are closer always to you than you realize. What I'm going to do is I have some scallions, and these are the last ones from the yard, actually. During the summer, every time I cut a scallion, every time I cut the ends of these, instead in the summertime, I went and planted it in the dirt. And so I had scallions growing all summer long, and it was pretty great. I didn't know that trick. Someone told me about doing that, and it was really satisfying. So I'm just chopping up a bunch of 2 scallions here. And I really think the decorating part of the centerpiece is very important. So don't forget to do this part, okay? This is, I think, really, and it also adds flavor. This is just not, garnishes are decorating, but garnish is also meant to add the last bit of flavor to things. So these are fresh, nice scallions that are getting put on top of this. And I put a little bit of brown rice underneath. Again, I told you that I think it would be ideal to put the brown rice, and then also after the brown rice to add a layer of greens. So that way you have a complete meal. You have the grain, the rice or quinoa, and then you have a bed of greens. And then the last thing that gets on top of it, remember we put a little tahini, so it has a little sesame tasting. And I hope my finger, and I'm going to put a few of the beige sesame seeds on top, and then a few of the black sesame seeds. And you think, how can you see the black? Well, the black end up falling on top of the green leaves, and then they fall on top of the rice, and it's spectacularly beautiful. And it is really, really beautiful, right? Like that. You can see how pretty it is. We've got our soup. We've moved these onions here. And the last thing we have is our muffins. And I made a bunch this morning because we couldn't cook cauliflower and muffins at the same time. I only have one oven. So these are the cooled muffins. Now, let me tell you, if you use the silicone pan, the muffins are just going to pop out. If you use the paper and just pour the batter in, if you eat the muffins when they're hot, the paper is definitely going to stick. But if you let the muffins cool, right? Here is a little teeny muffin here. If you let them cool, and I'm just going to show you, here's the paper, it comes right off. It doesn't stick at all. It's a very green muffin. I don't know if you can see. It's a little more brown probably than the recipe was intended, because I use spelt flour. So as soon as you start messing with the flour, but it's super moist and it's very green. And I'm not kidding you, it is so delicious. You will have to stop yourself from eating them. They're so good. And they're good for you because they've got spinach and apples and peanut butter and banana and milk and good flour. That's it for today. We've got it all. I wish everyone
Carole,
a very happy holiday, Thanksgiving, Indigenous Day, whatever you want to call the Thanksgiving Day. But be grateful for your food every single day. Farmers work very hard to get that food to your plate.
Carole, you were amazing as always. Everybody's loving everything that you've made today. So thank you for your time. Thanks to everybody. Join us next month on the 3rd of December for another Cooking with Chef Carole. Until then, I'm Jim Spellos. Hopefully Wendy will be with us next time. So we'll have the whole gang here. As always, thanks to Alan Smithy for all his work behind the scenes. We love having you here. And Chef Carole, you're the best. Thank you so
And
much.
Jim, thank you for filling in. I didn't thank you for filling in on Wendy's, absence. You did a great job, and thank you so much.
It's always a pleasure to be here with Cooking with Chef Carole. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.